Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Daisy Lightfoot, and today we may have something that'll get you fired up. And that's this country's growing acceptance of marijuana. Even the Republican presidential candidates discussed this topic at the recent GOP debate. 3 of the candidates supported ending this so-called prohibition on weed, and a certain Bush mentioned his own experience with grass.
So 40 years ago, I smoked marijuana, and I admit it. I'm sure that other people might have done it and may not want to say it in front of 25 million people. My mom's not happy that I just did. That's true.
It could come as a surprise to some, but in colonial times, marijuana use was not only legal, but encouraged. Since then, the United States has had a love-hate relationship with the drug. In the 30s, public service announcements were created to prove why depictions of narcotics should be banned from films. Some years later, the New York Academy of Medicine reported that, contrary to popular belief, marijuana did not actually cause insanity. And in the era of bell-bottoms, platform shoes, and most millennials' parents, weed became a staple in popular culture. But there still seems to be a cloud of smoke around the benefits and risks that come with smoking marijuana. The munchies, the giggles, and the ability to have cosmic conversations have left some asking if the drug is just recreational. Or does it do more harm than good by affecting the cognitive function of the college students with whom it's so popular? We asked CSUN students if they had high expectations or if skeptics are taking the cover off the pot.
I don't do it because I was raised not to, and I really don't see the benefit of it because I know people who, they have legitimate uses, but for me personally, I don't do it because I have no need, and what's the point of me walking around high? It's like, oh, am I myself or am I not? And I don't really like that whole, is this really real? That just sounds stupid to me.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of smoking marijuana. My dad is a recovering cancer survivor, so he smokes marijuana to help him out with a lot of pain. And, you know, marijuana helps him after a day of hard work to relax and, you know, rest up.
Every once in a while, it's okay because it kind of just gets your mind off everything and just makes you like feel happy for like a couple hours, you know, and then you just kind of knock out.
The only thing that really bothers me the most is, I guess, the culture behind it. How people make some sort of huge deal on it. I don't know. I find it annoying.
A new study by the University of Michigan finds daily marijuana use among college students is on the rise and surpassing daily cigarette smoking for the first time since 2014. Daily or near-daily marijuana use was reported by 5.9% of college students in 2014, the highest rate since 1980. But what's crystal clear is the increase in the popularity of marijuana use on television and movies. Shows like Weeds, Workaholics, and countless others display the impact of marijuana by showing the fun that comes with it. CSUN students give us their take on the media's influence on marijuana use.
Influence on social media. I'm on Facebook and I see on my news feed people talk about it or post whatever about it, so I don't know, I thought it was a college thing.
There's been more studies about alcohol being more damaging than weed, and yet we still persecute weed a lot more.
I believe the media has a downright role in that, especially when you have TV shows that you can find on Netflix called Weeds and just other things where they glorify smoking marijuana or getting into all these kind of recreational drugs. If you ask me, they're both in the same category. You're still killing yourself.
Actually, it has been proven that marijuana doesn't really like do damage to anything as much as like alcohol or cigarettes can do to you.
Like, if you look over time, it used to be weed was kind of like so hated that they would make movies like Reefer Madness and other kind of like PSA kind of videos to keep kids away from smoking it. But nowadays, those videos are actually being watched by people who smoke marijuana to make fun of what used to be the idea of marijuana. It's almost like a joke movie in itself, and it used to be a very serious, very important like PSA, and now it's like nothing. And I think that's kind of like helped make weed as like this cool time activity.
Whether you smoke it, eat it, mix it, or bake it, marijuana is making its way into the heart and lungs of many. On Point's John Gripe has more on the story.
Thank you, Daisy. I'm here with 2 guests this afternoon. One, Shannon Franklin, who is a therapist with the University Counseling Services at Cal State Northridge, and also with Margaret Spryzynski, who's a registered nurse here in Southern California. So, the student response seems to be that media, kind of does have an impact on our views of marijuana. So, Shannon, I'll start with you. Do you think the media today makes young people, maybe college age, more likely to give smoking marijuana a try?
Well, I think that the media has influences on all aspects of our lives, whether it comes to body image or what we should be doing, what we should not be doing, what we should pursue in our professions. And so I think having that system that is surrounding us, telling us what is good and what's bad, it can definitely influence what a student thinks is appropriate for them.
Margaret, would you agree? Would you also say that maybe media does make students maybe more susceptible to try smoking marijuana for the first time?
No, yeah, I think she explained that perfectly. I think that the media definitely has a huge influence on what you decide for yourself in your daily activities, and that's just how you go through life.
And as we continue down this road of legalizing marijuana, I mean, currently we have 4 states that have approved the drug for recreational use, and then there's about nearly half of all U.S. states who at least have some kind of medical laws kind of in place. We hear a lot about the benefits of smoking, maybe to fight physical ailments such as like cancer and things like that. But what are some of maybe more of the benefits medically you can get from marijuana for maybe more of a college-age student, maybe dealing with anxiety or stress, things like that? Shannon, I'll start with you again.
Well, I am a clinician, so I don't work with the medical aspects of it, so I would never prescribe any sort of medication. However, I do see students who come in who are stressed, who are anxious, who are depressed, and they might have tried marijuana in order to manage those symptoms. And the thing I'm really concerned about is, why did they turn to marijuana? Why was that interesting to them? And how were they trying to reduce their symptoms? Were they trying to feel more calm? Were they trying to get away from their problems? And so in my work with my students, I really look at the root of the problem versus the things used to hide it. We want to know what's really driving that train and what's making them want to use.
Definitely, definitely. And same thing to you, Margaret. Do students, are they using it really for any kind of physical reasons? Are there any physical ailments that are affecting college students? Or again, is it more maybe just for a recreational reason, or definitely maybe for a way to maybe kind of take the stress off in college?
I think stress management is always different for everybody. If people turn to drugs or alcohol or anything like that, the benefits of it are definitely going to be very individual. I mean, one person that smokes marijuana is not going to get the same high as somebody else that smokes marijuana. So it's hard to say what the benefits are, how it makes you feel, or what it's going to cause for people. I think that those are very, like I said, individual effects on people. So
yeah. They are individual, but at least maybe some of the symptoms that college students maybe are feeling, you could say could be combated, or medical marijuana maybe could be a way to fight something like that. But what are also maybe the risks of a younger student smoking pot? Maybe is there a bigger risk to your brain since it's not fully mature, something like that? Shannon?
Absolutely. So our prefrontal cortex develops until we're the age of 26. And what that really regulates is your ability to make decisions and to decide whether or not something's good for you, make choices. And it really affects our impulse control. So if you're using marijuana before the age, your brain's still growing, it's developing new pathways. And so it will interfere with those pathways. And again, you won't be able to use your impulse control to your best of your ability, say, further down the line of whether you want to use the drug or not.
And Margaret, do you think there's also, when smoking marijuana, can that maybe decrease memory, decrease focus? Is that something that could affect a student, especially for, academic reasons?
yeah, I think that being under the influence of anything will definitely alter your focus, and like Shannon was saying, your prefrontal cortex, the whole physiologic aspect of it. Yeah, college students are under 26 nowadays, and so they aren't fully matured, and the marijuana or other drugs can affect the myelination of that, and so it's going to affect the way it develops after you smoke. But yeah, I don't know.
I think another point is, if you smoke right before class, you're not going to be able to concentrate as well. You might experience some symptoms of paranoia, so you're sort of focused on what other people are thinking, and you're not going to be able to retain the memories that you need to. So just the daily use of actually being high in class or around studying can really negatively impact academics.
It sounds like also there's definitely some difference between the short-term effects maybe and then the longer-term effects as well. But there are definitely pros and cons maybe to both sides of using the drug. But do you think, we've come so far, we're very close maybe to having legalized weed in a lot of places in the United States. Do you think for how long we are, is there enough research kind of behind this whole thing, Shannon? Is there enough, do we know enough about marijuana to go fully outright and legalize the thing for recreational use?
That's a really good question. And I think politics and research don't always match up. And so I'm thinking about alcohol. Was there any research before they legalized that, unlegalized it, legalized it? And so the research will continue to grow and continue to develop, and I'm really interested to see what the results are.
You mentioned alcohol. Now, of course, that's you know, something that can affect public safety as far as, you know, there's a big thing about DUI. You know, that's a common, or I shouldn't say common, but something that happens maybe more than it should. Margaret, do you think if we were to legalize marijuana like this, would we have more issues, more problems with people getting behind the wheel while they're stoned, and do we also have ways to test people, you know, like field sobriety tests when we're out in the real world? Is there a way to test for marijuana like that too?
I don't think there's a way to test for marijuana. I think it would still be a sobriety test because that's just testing your mindfulness and how clear your head is, and I think that that's what you really should be careful for when you do marijuana, especially if you get behind the wheel. So if you look at other states that have legalized weed, I don't think it's been long enough to really say whether that's had an effect on more people getting behind the wheel and causing auto accidents or such things like that after being high. So I think that we'll probably have to wait a little longer to see, but I do feel that like in places like Colorado that, you know, hospitalizations may have decreased and criminalizations and other auto accidents may have decreased, and I'm not sure that that's really attributed to legalizing marijuana or if people are just not drinking as much now that marijuana is legal. So
I mean, it's always seems like it's always a case-by-case basis, like I think both of you guys were kind of saying. But when there is a certain case for a patient, when they go in and they, you know, want to maybe get medical marijuana, maybe they've been prescribed it already, how do they decide like the dosage that you should take? Is there ever an amount, a specific amount that, you know, someone is told to take for whatever type of medical reason they're trying to do it for? Margaret?
I feel like people would just smoke until you get the effect that they need. I don't think that there's, I mean, when you go into things like tolerance, then, I mean, people that have been smoking weed for a long time definitely need more to get on the same level as somebody who have just tried it for a few weeks. It's not going to be the same dose. So I think that it's not really a dosing thing. There's no like criteria or spectrum to go off of that. It's more of what's going to get you to where you need to be to feel the way that you need to feel.
Yeah. Shannon, would you agree that students or anyone smoking weed in general is just kind of on their own to figure out how much they're supposed to take?
I think that a doctor would be able to prescribe them whatever it is, but on my side, weed definitely has side effects such as withdrawal, and you can be diagnosed with a cannabis addiction. And so those are the things that I keep my eyes open for. What are the symptoms that are sort of getting out of hand? And that might deal with how much they're using, how potent it is, how they're using it. So that's kind of things that I assess for as a clinician.
And is marijuana maybe a cheaper drug than prescription medication? I mean, obviously there's a lot of steps if a student wants to, you know, if they have a medical reasons to take it, a lot of steps to go to a doctor, get something prescribed, go, you know, get that exact amount. Where, like you guys said, marijuana is, you know, there's not really a prescribed amount. It's just, you know, figure it out kind of on your own. So, Margaret, let's start again with you. Do you think maybe the cost and accessibility of marijuana attracts a younger, maybe college-age crowd to do it, whether for medical reasons or maybe just for recreation?
I definitely think it is attractive just because of the media. I mean, it looks cooler to do things like that. But from a medical perspective, I don't think that marijuana is a good alternative to prescription medications because you have to look at why they need it. I mean, what's the cause of them? Like, do they need it for anxiety? Do they need it for stress management? And then there are other drugs out there. There are so many medications that we have now that marijuana should never be your first line of treatment for anything. It should, you know, if you look at cancer patients and let's say they're nauseated, there's a lot of anti-nausea drugs that they could use to fix that. But since they're going through such vigorous chemotherapy, sometimes that doesn't work. And in some cases, I've seen that marijuana does work. So in that sense, yeah, I would say that that would be something acceptable. But to use marijuana as a first line of treatment, like I said, it was not really something that I think is appropriate.
Shannon, would you maybe agree with that?
Thinking about the costliness of marijuana in comparison to other drugs, I think about our CSUN students here, and a lot of students that I see that walk in my door are working between 15 and 30 hours a week. They're first-generation students, they're commuting, and they work really, really hard to be here. And so if you're going to get high off something and you want it hard enough, you can spend whatever you want on it. But in my experience here, students really do put academics first, and I think cost is sort of a last factor when it comes to determining whether or not they want to use marijuana.
You know, there's also a lot of talk probably in the media and around the whole marijuana thing about whether it's a gateway drug. Maybe you guys could give me your opinion on, is it generally a gateway drug, but do you think maybe that answer changes when you're talking specifically just about a college student? And what I mean by that is, you know, if a college student is at a party and they're offered marijuana, and I don't know what the numbers would be, but likely, and probably more times than not, they are, you know, more willing to accept it when it's just offered kind of in like a social setting like that. Do you think being offered that once and maybe accepting it could be a gateway drug, could lead to, hey, the next time when you're offered something a little bit worse, a little bit heavier, you might also be willing just to accept something like that? Shannon?
When I think about addiction, I think about what causes addiction, and that's a field of interest of mine. And so a lot of things factor into it. And some people are just predisposed with that addiction gene. And so if they try something, it's going to be a lot harder for them to stop trying new things or stop doing more of what they already tried. Versus maybe someone who doesn't have that gene in them and they try it once, they can put it down or not need to try something else. It also impacts your home life and how you grew up and if you had any trauma or any sort of mental health issues, because that all impacts whether or not you're more likely to get addicted to something and want to try other things.
And Margaret, would your answer be maybe the same? Do you think it could be considered a gateway drug in some instances?
I mean, like, that's when you have to, I kind of don't even think a gateway drug is real. I think that that's something that's kind of made up in society to scare people. What do you define as a gateway drug? I mean, if you're going to say that marijuana is a gateway drug, you're going to have to say that everything is a gateway drug. Everything has been preceded by something else, and it doesn't necessarily mean you did marijuana, so that's going to make you have the decisions to do other drugs. I think that in general, people who choose to do marijuana are probably more open-minded, and in that sense, are open to other drugs as well. I don't think that there's anything, or there's any such thing as a gateway drug. I think it's made up.
Well, kind of shift gears just a little bit. I'm going to bring up this little survey that's it's done by the American College Health Association. It's actually done every year by these guys, and they do a survey right here on the CSUN campus. They ask a whole bunch of questions to students about their habits, their behaviors, kind of on maybe just the most pressing issues, you know, kind of for the year. So in one of the surveys, they, of course, asked students about smoking marijuana, smoking pot, and there's actually more male students who answered that they've tried marijuana at least one time than females. So do you think genders react, Shannon, do you think genders reacting differently to being on the substance?
And I think if you look at the differences, it's not that large of an amount if I remember correctly. So I think not necessarily it's going to be steadfast that men over women try it. I don't know the research particularly to match that. However, I think this assessment is really good because it helps people like me at the counseling center or people at the health care center to find out what kind of services our students need. Is this an issue? Who do they trust with their health care providers? What kind of issues do they want to talk about? And how can we address and serve our students?
And you are right. I think I just looked up the difference in there. It's only about 4%. 4% more males say that they've tried marijuana than females. So not that big of a difference. But Margaret, do you think that, again, does this media maybe play into shaping that at least a little bit? As far as men maybe smoking a little bit more than women do?
I definitely think so. I think it just goes to society and to see like what kind of pressures we place on the younger male population versus what we place on the younger female population. So I think that that's what it's really caused by.
And then there's also another portion of the survey. It says students also answered within the last year, over half of the CSUN student population said that they have felt overwhelming anxiety, and over 80% say that they have been overwhelmed at some point with everything that they've had to do. But the numbers are far higher for female students. That's upwards of 20% more that women say that they have felt stressed out, you know, along those lines, more than men say that they maybe feel extra stressed. Why aren't the numbers higher than for females smoking? And does that also maybe suggest that marijuana among college students not really being used for those medical reasons, maybe just being used more for just for the recreational reasons? Shannon?
Yeah, I'm trying to follow your question a little bit. So it sounds like women report being more anxious about academic stuff.
Yeah, they sometimes in all the different questions, there's things about overwhelming anxiety, feeling very sad, just being overwhelmed with everything that you have to do. Generally, I think on most of those questions, females answered anywhere between 10 and 20% higher than the men. But then, of course, like we just talked about, doesn't necessarily show a correlation in smoking weed. So does the stress and anxiety, as far as, being, marijuana combating that, is it really used by students that way then? Or do those results kind of just show that students are maybe just smoking for the fun of it and not really for maybe the medical reasons?
So because the anxiety in the women are so high, but it doesn't really match with the marijuana use, we're questioning, do those two go together? Absolutely. Well, I think women historically present higher instances of mental health issues depending on what they are, but you have to think of the context. Women tend to be more comfortable expressing where they feel their shortcomings are. They tend to take on more shortcomings than they actually might perceive. And so I don't know if those two things are correlated, but I think it's interesting if you look at sort of the perceived notion of how much people are using and the actual amount of how much people are using. And you were talking about the pressure that men have. And I think that's right. People do feel pressured to act a certain way. But in reality, CSUN students are not using as much as they think they're using.
Yeah, let's talk about that right now. I think I want to ask you guys, if you had to estimate a number, if you had to take a guess, let's say for the CSUN population, how many students have tried smoking marijuana at least one time? Margaret, how many students? What would you say the percentage is for how many students have at least tried it, maybe at least one time?
I would probably say more than 3/4 of them.
More than 3/4, more than 75%?
I feel that it's really rare to, find somebody here or wherever and talk about it and find that they've never ever tried it before. I just feel like it's a really common thing nowadays when you talk about that and ask them if they've ever tried it, and they'd be like, yeah. But very rarely do I find somebody that says, no, I've never done that before.
Yeah. Shannon, what would you estimate the numbers to be?
Well, I've had a peek at the study before, but I was surprised working here. I started beginning of the semester, and I thought there would be a lot more students reporting a history of marijuana use. And so I was talking to a colleague about that, and CSUN's not known for a party school. It's known for hardworking kids who are really dedicated to their education. And so it kind of made sense that maybe that's not going to be a thing that a lot of CSUN students try.
So before I reveal the numbers, before we talk about those, we also went out and we asked a few CSUN students, what they thought, what their estimation was for the numbers. And we have a few shots of them, so let's take a look at some of those right now. How many people here at CSUN, college students, you think have tried weed at least once before?
I think about half.
I'm guessing around 70%.
I would confidently say over 50%. Maybe I would guesstimate almost 70, if not more.
Percentage-wise, I would say more than 50%. I sometimes call this campus the Mile High Club. So, yeah, I'd say more than about going into 60%.
Close to maybe the 75% that Margaret was saying. But to tell you the truth, the survey that was done by the American College Health Association says here at CSUN only 37% of students said that they've tried marijuana one time, and less than half of that, about 15%, answer that they smoke maybe on a more regular basis. Only 15% have smoked within the last 30 days. So, Shannon, I'll start with you. You were kind of getting there before me, but do you think, why is there such a big difference on these perceived numbers and the actual numbers?
Absolutely, and this is part of human nature. Social norms, what we think everyone is doing isn't necessarily what they're actually doing. And so that kind of built into the pressure that students might feel of wanting to be like their friends, looking for a way to connect and feel like a part of something. But it's interesting because that's not actually how it works out when you look at the numbers.
Well, Margaret, maybe to kind of wrap things up, if you had to, if a student was thinking about giving marijuana a try, what would be maybe your recommendation, or at least what would be the things that you would tell them to think about, going forward before they made a decision like that?
I definitely think that they'd have to be a little bit introspective and see why they want to do it, why they want to give it a try. I mean, is there really not another alternative to, feeling a part of a social norm or dealing or coping with whatever it is that is kind of influencing them to try it. So I don't think that it should ever be something that they should be convinced to do, and it shouldn't be something that they should turn to at first. I think that if there's a reason to do it, you should figure out why you're going to do it and try to find different ways to solve those issues.
Mm-hmm. So then, Shannon, same question. What's your recommendation to the students that come to you and have these problems and maybe want to smoke marijuana as well?
Absolutely. I think I really want to work on them getting the core of why they're using. Marijuana, it can be a quick fix for some people, but in the long run, I want to work on skills that you can take until your adulthood to figure out what to do when you're stressed, what to do when you're anxious. And students can come over to the University Counseling Services and meet with one of us and have that conversation and get that attention and get the knowledge that they need.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, that just does about it for our time today. So I thank you guys for helping us out and having a little conversation about medical uses and recreational uses of maybe smoking marijuana among college students. Thanks, guys.
Come on, let's go.
Just a minute, I gotta finish this.
Wait, you're gonna post those pictures of Mary?
Yep. She thinks she's so hot.
But her mom and dad will see them. Her grandmother, her little sister, everyone she knows, it's gonna kill her.
Who cares? Just a couple of pictures. It's no big deal.
No big deal? Don't. This has gotta stop.
They told me a bottle couldn't dream. That I would never become a superhero. But I learned how to fly. Just to come back in a new disguise and be the hero that I've always wanted to be.
Hey, did you know 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Let's go to the shelterpetproject.org and meet if you are in a shelter near you. Harlow, oh, she's one great listener who loves to hear all your stories. My kind of cat. Cerulo is a sweet, goofy boy who's eager to please. Sounds just like another dog I know. So go to the shelterpetproject.org, search your local shelters and rescues, and go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
You taught him how to hit a baseball, how to hit a receiver, the strike zone, the net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. Get Fire Adapted now. Learn simple steps at fireadapted.org.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CSUN On Point. Look for us Sunday mornings on LA's Channel 36 at 11:30 and tune into KCSN on 88.5 FM at 5:30 in the morning to listen each week. For all of us here at On Point, I'm Daisy Lightfoot, and we'll see you next week.